Hello. Let's see here. Hello.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, doing good.
Awesome. Should we give it a couple minutes, see if anyone hops on?
Yeah, sure. That sounds good.
Awesome. How are you doing today?
Doing pretty good. I have off on Fridays, so it's a nice chill day. Got a lot of stuff done.
I know it's always nice when the weekend's coming up.
Yes, exactly. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I forgot that it's Friday until you mentioned it. I feel like every day kind of blends in together, but that hang out with my kiddos over the weekend, so that's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I feel like those last minute holiday preparations is what I'm going to be doing this weekend.
Yes, yes. I probably should write that on my to-do list to make sure because we're gonna be going to town.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Where are you going? Anywhere fun?
Uh, Michigan. We're gonna see family, so I think
Oh,
seeing family is so it'll be fun for us and for
yeah.
the kids especially.
Yeah, that's always a good time. I'm looking forward to that too.
Hi Chelsea, I see we have someone joined in. So maybe we should just get started, and if
Sure.
you come in, then we'll go with that. So I'm Vika. I'm an integrative health practitioner focusing on gut health, hormones, and autoimmunity. I started my own journey with my own gut health and Hashimoto's that eventually led me here. So let's hear more about Elena.
Hi, everyone. I am Elena Mundorf, and I am a holistic mental health practitioner. I've actually been in the mental health field for over 20 years as a psychotherapist. And so that's kind of where my journey started, actually. I found that over the years, there were a group of people that definitely got better from therapy. And then there were a group of people who, despite doing all of the things and practicing all the skills, really didn't get any better. At the time, before I kind of was aware of this integrative, holistic world, the only thing that I could do at the time was refer them to a psychiatrist. And some people were happy to do so. But there were a subgroup of people, which I found has grown over the years, who really desired not to go on pharmaceutical medication. And so they were really interested in something different. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't have anything to offer them. So I really found that there was sort of this gap. There was a missing link. And kind of as you mentioned for yourself, I ended up going through my own health journey at the time. Head to toe eczema, gastrointestinal issues, migraines that were just debilitating, even panic and anxiety that I didn't understand. And it wasn't until I found, some holistic, approaches such as functional medicine and homeopathy that I started to get better. And that's when I realized this is it. This is that missing link. This is what has been missing for my own patients. And that's really kind of what jump started my interest in pursuing training in both of those areas. And it wasn't until I started incorporating that I just saw the transformation. The people who didn't get better started to get better. And it was because of that combination of, the mental health focus as well as the body healing work.
It's crazy that once you see this, like see that, you want to share it with everyone because you're like, how is this not something that's accessible to everyone at all times? And we had to work really hard to find it ourselves, but then when we find it, we're like, okay, everyone has to know because it's so beneficial. So I will go into a little spiel that I like to always tell people in the beginning of their holistic journey that talks about these three buckets of stress. And this is why, like, some people, they do really well on just therapy. Some people need more of the physical health, and most people need a blend, right? Because there's three different things that can lead to eventual dis-ease, so lack of ease in the body, right? And that could be things like life stressors, and that's things that you usually go over in therapy. It might be things that you're working on by yourself. It's like, you know, having high responsibilities, demands. Some of them you can't escape. Might be family and relationships, navigating difficult relationships or toxic ones. Having that in your life can lead to severe stress. It could be career and finances, which is huge for most people. And then health and wellness foundations, like not getting enough sleep, not, you know, focusing on your diet, not moving enough, or moving too much and it's stressing you out. And that whole like spirituality and self-development, like feeling fulfilled and at peace and safe inside your own body. So that could be one whole area that can lead to eventual disease. But then there's two other buckets. One I refer to as, like, I'm getting a phone call, which was unexpected. And that could be, you know, malnutrition. Sorry. You're not getting enough nutrients in your body because of maybe gut problems. You might be having a lot of infections going on. You might have food sensitivities that's affecting how you react to the world around you and how stressed out your body is. Imbalanced hormones, a dysregulated nervous system, which usually has some involvement with those life stressors or how you were raised or past trauma, and now you're kind of stuck there and you don't know how to get out of it. And then genetic vulnerability. So all that is like what's happening within your body, right? That's kind of making you feel unwell. And then you combine those two buckets with environmental stressors, some of which we can't control. And they could be, you know, your environmental conditions, the kind of home you're in. It could be environmental allergens or toxins. Mold could be some of it, heavy metals, and then pathogens, which again can lead to those like gut infections and other diseases. So when you combine all three of them, it usually leads to some problems. But that's why picking away at each bucket one at a time can help a lot of people feel a lot better.
I love that concept of the three buckets that you just talked about, because, you know, it makes so much sense when I look back, you know, as to why only a certain segment of people got better with therapy alone. And, you know, therapy is designed primarily to work on that life stressors bucket, right? And so, you know, the internal stressors, the environmental stressors, those just really aren't integrated. It's just not what the training entails, you know, when you go to school for this. And so, you know, where some people had predominantly internal, you know, or those life stressors, you know, talk therapy was wonderful and is wonderful. And that's why some people really flourish with that, you know, empty that bucket, you know, heal all of those things. And now they feel fantastic, you know, and it also kind of helps to explain why some people did all of that. You know, they truly did all of that healing, and they were still like, I don't know, I'm doing this and that, I'm coping better, you know, I'm managing my, you know, work life stress, you know, better, you know, and I still feel really anxious, or I still feel really depressed or just off. And again, at the time, I didn't understand why, but as you're describing those three buckets, you know, it's really a light bulb, because those internal stressors weren't addressed, right? The body, the whole system, what our brain or head is attached to. And I think some people forget that, right? Like our brain is attached to our body. Yeah. So how could it not be all connected? But that wasn't addressed at the time. And then those environmental stressors, you know, the onslaught, you know, we're just living in more and more of a toxic world. And if we don't know how to kind of manage that as well as we realistically can, from a holistic perspective, that stuff is just going to continue to create inflammation, and that down the road is going to continue to contribute to depression, anxiety, mood imbalances, irritability, that sort of thing. So, you know, that I love that explanation of the three buckets.
Yeah, and you're so right that like it's really about learning how to cope with every single one, because therapy is a great tool for life stressors, and then learning how to manage the incoming environmental stressors without, again, overstressing yourself out mentally, but just having all those tools, and then reducing that bucket of internal stressors through things like, you know, what you eat, gut health, and homeopathy, which we'll go into, it all makes a huge impact. So another thing that me and you were talking about earlier that, you know, we want to share with people is that we kind of look at it healing as like through levels. So level one is usually with mindset, because unless you create the right mindset to go on this journey, you'll always kind of have setbacks, because you're constantly have to reevaluate what's working, what's not working, what are you missing. So if you don't have a good mindset established, then you can kind of just hop off and just stop trying, and that can, you know, reduce success, right? So that usually comes with, you know, different things, like being willing to look at all the other options besides pills and talk therapy, and being interested and willing to take on a journey, and then developing body awareness. And this is something I'd definitely love to hear your opinion on, because we kind of previously talked on our own about like kids versus adults, and I would love to hear your perspective on the difference between body awareness in children who are still young and innocent and more in tune, and adults, because of how we've grown and developed, and, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know you and I talked about this a little bit. We could kind of nerd out forever.
Yeah.
But I just, you know, kids are so intuitive, right? They're just by nature in touch with themselves. They haven't learned all of these kind of rules or expectations yet. And so they're really, really great about listening to their bodies and being in tune with their bodies. You know, it's interesting because over the years, one of my specialties has been eating disorders, and talk about detaching and disconnecting from the body, right? And sort of that process of reconnecting. I see that even in my own kids. You know, I have one 8-year-old daughter, and she's just really good about like, you know, I'm hungry. I want to eat something. I'm not hungry right now. Can I wait a little while? You know, eating and then saying I'm full. You know, she's just intuitive, you know, and I try not to mess with that, you know, because I know over the years, as we get older, again, there's like an expectation of, you know, clean your plate, you know, finish everything in front of you, you know, and what does that do? That detaches us from our body awareness. You know, our body's telling us we're full, but now there's this external voice or signal that's telling us, ignore that and keep eating. You know, I danced for many years, and then I did track for many years. And, you know, as much as I loved both of those things, the training really was about don't listen to your body. You're in pain, keep going. You're tired, push through. You know, oh, you ran too much and now you threw up. Great, wipe up and keep going. You know, and it's, you know, looking back, I mean, there's some benefits, right, to pushing ourselves outside of our limits a little bit. You know, that's where some growth can happen. But that complete detachment, I just think is so unhealthy. And kids are just amazing about like just knowing exactly what they need when they need it. You know, they're sad and, you know, they want a hug. They need some caring. They cry, right?
Yeah. My kids will straight up say, I need a hug. So I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. My youngest is so intuitive with like his senses. He'll even cry and be like, Mommy, I'm crying. You know, I'm like, of course, let me give you a hug. It's so cute.
I
But
love.
as a kid growing up, I learned very early on not to listen to my body. I didn't understand what full meant, because my parents were always like, clean your plate, you have to eat everything. I'm like, or they would say, oh, we're about to go somewhere, so you have to make sure to eat because we can't eat later. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to stuff my stomach. So later on it works. And then later, as I became an adult, I was like, wait, the body doesn't work that way. It's not going to like store all the food and like, it's like a pouch, you know, caring for later. It's actually going to be overloaded and then out of control, and it's not going to, you know, work out in my favor. So that is funny. And I totally get like with sports or even in school, I was always pushed to like go to the next limit. And there's something that's magical about growing from that. But when that's all you're taught and you're not ever giving yourself a break, that's when usually all the harm happens, right? And if you learn it very early and you continue on, I think most of those people eventually have some sort of crash. That was me, you know. And then I had to learn from scratch, oh, wait a second, my body has been telling me this forever. Like, I didn't understand the concept of like the difference between like a healthy pain, like it burns so good, versus like this is just an injury. You know what I mean? I just
Stop.
for we're the same. So when I go to the gym and I'm like, oh my God, my knees are like, I'm like, I worked really hard to run like an hour, and now I'm like proud of myself, and now I'm like, okay, that's not good. And you know, it all adds up. So there is a huge importance of building that body awareness and understanding that it has a lot of value. Yeah, you can push the boundaries a little bit here and there, but keep coming back to the body because it's giving you a lot of signals of what you should and shouldn't do.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting because when I was doing training in functional medicine, my teacher used to always say that, you know, pain is a gift. You know, a headache is a gift. Now, you know, we live in a world where, you know, people pop pills to try to suppress that and make it go away. But that headache or that pain in your knee is giving you information, right? It's trying to tell us something. And sometimes our body is trying to tell us to slow down, you know, that we need a rest. We're hitting burnout, you know, and like you know, I think in retrospect, looking back, part of that sort of health crisis that I had at the time was just ultimate burnout. You know, it was years and years of pushing and not listening and, you know, moving forward despite my body trying to tell me, you know, I mean, again, at the time I didn't know better, but, you know, I had eczema from head to toe. And so I went to the doctor, and of course, they just gave me a steroid cream. Well,
Yeah.
what does that do? It just suppresses it, right? So, but, you know, at the time, I'm slathering this stuff on my body. You know, I'm popping, you know, these prescription medications to help me with migraines, and I'm still pushing. And
Yep.
my trying to scream to me, what are you doing? You know, and the other thing that I learned going back to kind of that mindset piece and why that's like that level one so important is that you could be on the best diet, whatever that is. You know, you could be on the best diet. Um, you could be eating the healthiest food. You could be living a toxin-free life. You could be doing all of these things, and you could still have disease if you're chronically stressed, right?
Yes.
Stress alone can create disease. And I think people forget about the relevance of stress and overlook it. It's like, well, I'm eating well, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. You know, it's like, yeah, but are you managing your stress? You know, what is your mindset like? You know, what is your view on the world? Is it positive? Is it healing? What messages are you giving your body? You know, it's so cool that like, it's an interesting concept that like the mind takes its cue from the body, right?
Oh,
So I always think of the body as being this like, you know, being that can't see. And so it takes its clues from the mind. And
I
so,
like.
you know, if the mind is saying like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? This is awful. This is terrible. The body's going, I think really bad things are happening out there. This is not good. We better rev up that inflammation. We better prepare to fight. There's a there's a war going on out there. Like bad things are happening, you know, and so that again will over time overwork the body and create disease. You know, alternately, if we're saying everything's good, everything's calm, I got this, we'll get through it. You know, life is generally positive, then our body goes, okay, good. You know,
Yeah.
it must be okay out there. We can relax. We can, you know, rest and digest. We can heal. We can do all of these things because we're not fighting for our life, you know, and without that piece, forget it. The body doesn't care what else you do. It's going to be prepared for disease.
And science backs this up with the autonomic nervous system. You know, when you are stressed, like emotionally stressed, you're going into that like fight or flight mode, and your body does not focus on digestion during that time. It does not focus on recovery during that time. It's just focusing on how do I manage this stressor. And you could fight, you could run away, or you could, you know, what is that? You're a therapist, so what's that third one where you just kind
Right.
of
It's
freeze,
like,
freeze. Yeah. So freeze. So it's like those are your options. Your option is not recovery and healing. So even if you're eating all the right foods, you're not digesting them properly. You're not absorbing those nutrients. And that's kind of what happens. And I think that's also why you see people who are in like, you know, abusive situations, whether they're emotionally or mental, they end up having a lot of physical problems because their body is always stuck in that, you know, fight or flight mode.
absolutely. I mean, short-term stress, right? Short when the cortisol goes up and that fight or flight that's survival, right? Like that's helpful. We need that. But our body really is not intended. It was never designed to live in that chronically. Because
Right.
like you said, I mean, part of nature is that it turns off certain functions, and that's purposeful, right? It's like if I'm fighting for my life, if I'm just trying to survive, I don't have time. My body doesn't have time to worry about digesting things and absorbing things. That takes energy that my body doesn't have right
Right.
now. And so if that's shut off chronically long term, that's an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So another thing we wanted to talk about is like what would the next level be up from mindset. So one thing we were going to mention is like maybe nutrition would be the next level, focusing on, eliminating certain trigger foods and a diet that supports your healing, which might look different for a lot of people, but it sounded like in both of our journeys, like gluten-free and eliminating those like food sensitivities made a huge difference on our inflammation levels.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, similar to what we were just talking about, foods that our body thinks are foreign invaders, that they view as enemies, increases stress.
yeah.
I think most people just think of stress as all of that bucket number one, right? All of the things kind of going on in life. But stress could be physiological as well, right? It can be medical. And so when there's an onslaught to, from the body's perspective, like from food sensitivities or just foods that the body doesn't tolerate super well, that keeps stress going, and it's like we've got to give the body a break, right? And by identifying what those food sensitivities are, by eliminating those things, it really gives our body a break, like, whew, okay, there's no more enemies, coming our
Yeah.
way.
I love how you described it that way.
Yeah, and so, and it doesn't have to be permanent. Now, for me, there are a couple, dairy, sadly, gluten, those things I just, do much better without. But I mean, I had so many food sensitivities for a while because my gut was so destroyed, and, the leaky gut was, so pervasive that, there was a bunch of stuff that my body was just reacting to, and I had to eliminate that for a while. And then once the healing happened, I was able to introduce most of those things. I don't know if you had the same experience, but
That was definitely similar to me. Like when I first had gut issues, it was like I going out to a restaurant was like a thing of anxiety because I didn't know what they were adding in there, but it triggered a lot of like pain and inflammation. Eventually, I narrowed it down to just gluten and dairy, and being away from that for a long time helped kind of heal and soothe things. And then, I went more into the functional medicine route, and now I can eat dairy. I still don't eat it all the time. I think if I ate it every single day, my body probably wouldn't be the happiest, but I can eat that. But I still kind of stay away from gluten.
yeah, it's interesting because I once in a while cheat with dairy gluten.
I
That
know, like it's even scary.
I mean, I'd really have to be desperate to deal with the consequences of that. But a few weeks ago, I think it was around Thanksgiving, I had a little bit of dairy, and I still have little tiny patches of eczema. People don't realize that, the skin, our gut is like a gigantic mouth, and our skin is like a gigantic mouth, right? So if we slather things on our skin, if we put things into our body, and again, that everything being connected, sure enough, popped up a couple of patches, and it was a risk I was willing to take. But now I'm gonna have to kind of heal and clean things up again in order to help my body to calm down and to know that it doesn't have to kind of erupt into all of these things. As again, as a result of sort of that onslaught that I gave to it again.
Definitely. And it's a good topic to mention that for people who are joining in or listening and they don't know that food sensitivities can cause other symptoms besides just digestive. It could be skin rashes. It could be like I used to get like ulcers. I used to get joint pain. Like I used to also from gluten. I actually did try cheating gluten and I don't get this reaction anymore. But when I first started, I would be tired, like sleepy right away. Like I would have to take a nap. So I always say if you are extremely tired to the point of needing to take a nap and can't function for the rest of the day after a food, that's probably not your food. It's
Oh,
probably um,
brain fog, right?
brain fog. Yep.
Anxiety, I mean,
Anxiety. So that's what I get now from gluten. I don't get as much of like the fatigue. I don't get ulcers anymore, but I'll get anxiety within 30 minutes of trying it. And then the next day, my body will just be a little bit more off. So it's not that bad,
right.
but I can imagine if I do it every single day, it
Mhm.
probably will go back to like how it was, who knows when. So it's like there's so many different symptoms that you might not link. Headaches. I know somebody who gets a cough from dairy, so when they eat dairy, they start coughing and they didn't realize it. I used to get mucus production from dairy, so I'd get a lot of phlegm, and like it was so embarrassing. I'd be looking out the window, and I'm like, my husband's like here, and I'm like, slow down, I gotta spit it out because it would be like a huge blob, which sounds ridiculous, but
Yeah, I
yeah.
know when sometimes when people, so they come into my office and I'm like, oh, you have depression, oh, you have anxiety. We need to take a look at your gut. And they look at me like I'm crazy, but all of the, I mean, there's a list, right? I mean, maybe we could do that sometimes. There's a list of symptoms that are just from food sensitivities that have nothing to do with the gut, so you can have no gut specific symptoms and still have gut issues and need to heal the gut. So much of disease actually begins in the gut, and it's important to kind of heal that in order to sort of systemically heal the rest of the body and the brain. So yeah, I had a lot of those same symptoms that you were describing. And I mean, it was really coming off of, for me, gluten and dairy, and at the time, a few other things, but now just this, maintaining those things that got rid of the eczema, that got rid of the migraines, that got rid of the gut issues. The anxiety again came way down because here I'm like, I'm a therapist. I'm doing all the right things. Why am I having anxiety? Why am I having panic attacks? Well, because it had nothing to do with my mindset, right? It had nothing to do with life stressors. It had everything to do with bucket 2 and bucket 3. And those were the things that at the time weren't healed and were just, coming out with all of these symptoms that, my body was just trying to contend with.
Yeah, it's funny. I just think of like, imagine someone who's never learned anything about this and they tell you they have anxiety and you're like, oh, going gluten free might actually improve your anxiety. They're going to be like, you're nuts. There's no way that not eating bread is going to make me feel better. But it's crazy how it does like have an effect, especially in modern day. Maybe it was not the case, hundreds of years ago, but whatever's going on, it seems like to be a consistent pattern for people.
Yeah, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's how it's processed here. I've actually heard some stories of people who are able to ingest gluten if they go to, a different country. So there's maybe something about how it's processed. Maybe again, it's that like bucket 3 with like all the environmental stressors now that are like increased. I mean, listen, again, we live kind of in a more of a toxic environment now, right? A lot more exposure to environmental allergens and pathogens and stuff like that. And so maybe that is like, oh, whereas our immune system could handle it at one point, now, with buckets 1 and 2, doing some damage too, it's like, I can't, my body can't even handle this anymore. But whatever the reason, I mean, it doesn't work for everybody, right? It's not like, oh, everyone who has anxiety should get rid of gluten and then you're all better. But it's definitely one of the things to consider, along with what other kind of systemic sort of physical ailments, issues are going on. Or infections, right? I mean, there can be dysbiosis in the gut. I mean, you're the gut specialist, you know this for sure, that there can be
Yeah.
other contribute.
Having leaky gut, if you fix that, then your sensitivity to gluten can go away. And obviously, everyone's different. So some people, whether they have celiac or not, may not be able to do gluten at all later on, may not be able to reintroduce it. But some people are able to reintroduce it after they heal their gut. So it all depends per person. But infections usually are a big part of it.
And that's where I do think that, I mean, I think it's important to work with a practitioner. I think it's important to work with an integrative or holistic practitioner, because I think when it comes to gut stuff, it's really about like test, don't guess, right? There can be, I mean, sometimes I have like friends who are like, should I take a probiotic? And I'm like, I don't know. I mean, maybe not. You know, for you, it could help. For you, it can make things worse. It really depends on what's going on, right? Like what the gut issues are. And it is so not a one size fits all protocol, as I'm sure you can attest to.
Definitely, because even in my journey, I was able to get so many of my symptoms down just with diet and lifestyle, but then it still turned into Hashimoto's and autoimmunity. And I was able to get my gut symptoms under control, but I didn't know there were underlying infections. So if I like got off my diet or if I was extra stressed, then all like certain symptoms would pop up. But once I started doing the test, I was like, oh, and I was able to get rid of my symptoms for my Hashimoto's, but also heal that. So it kind of extends your journey if you don't do testing. You're like, guess and check, and some things might work, but you're still, if you leave that problem there, the root trigger, it can eventually cause other issues down the line. That's why I do think it is really helpful to work with a practitioner. On one hand, I don't want people to get so nervous that they don't do anything at all. Like if they don't have access to a practitioner, I want them to know that diet and lifestyle can still bring a lot of things, help improve a lot of things. But if you really want to like nip it in the bud, then getting that information is so incredibly valuable. Like it's really going to give you a clear-cut formula of what you need to do.
Yeah, I had a similar experience actually. So, you know, when I talked about eliminating gluten and dairy at that point, really made a tremendous difference. I mean, everything went from like a 10 to like a 3, but it
Mhm.
was still a 3, right?
Exactly.
So there was still this like, things still aren't quite fully better. They're a lot better. I can function. You know, this story is maybe a little embarrassing, but I used to tell this story where like when I worked kind of further away, before I had my own practice, I knew all of the stops to get, because I had to know where all of the bathrooms were just in case. That's how bad the gut issues were, that I knew every, you know, stop. I knew every, you know, fast food place or coffee shop or some place that I could stop along the way. And a friend of mine at the time was like, you know, that's not normal, right? It's like, really? People just don't know all of the stops along the way just in case they have to stop. And she's like, yeah, no. And that was really kind of eye-opening for me. But, you know, eliminating those foods took me, you know, to a vastly better place. But similar to you, it wasn't until I had testing done, and it turns out I had SIBO, right, which is a small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and H. pylori,
Yeah.
which is another gut issue. And until I healed those, the dietary stuff could only take me so far. I'm still so grateful for that. And like you said, people should know that, you know, sometimes, you know, kind of an elimination diet or, you know, trial, you know, alone can really make a world of difference. But to get to that, like, over the finish line, I feel like, you know, it's so helpful to truly understand what's going on so that the treatment, the healing can be targeted.
Absolutely. Yeah, mine was I had candida, I had blastose hominis and H. pylori. I was able to actually get my H. pylori down like under the threshold just with diet, but it was still causing that like immune reaction behind the scenes. And then the combo of the three was just not good. So getting rid of those, it's like my energy started coming back. I stopped having flares. My immune system was better. But the diet, it's kind of like the same thing as you. When I had gut problems, it was like I was crying myself to sleep every night. It hurt so bad. And I didn't know at first if it was like a women's health issue or a gut issue. And I hear this actually a lot, that some people think it's endometriosis, then they figure out it's SIBO or something along those lines. But it hurt all the time and it was really painful. So going gluten-free, dairy-free, and just eating a more anti-inflammatory diet at home got me down from that 10, like, oh my God, I can't function, I can't live. This is just like, I was like, it's either me figure it out or I die, because I don't see how I can function like this. So I got it down to like a 3. I was able to maybe a 5 at first. Then after several years, a 3. And then once I, you know, got into functional medicine, it was like, oh wow, I feel like a human again. I feel like I'm 16. I feel like I'm 15. I didn't know this was possible, you know?
And like you said, then you just want to like scream it from the rooftop, right? Like, oh my gosh, you all have to know this. I mean, it's transformative. It is life healing. It is life changing. It was life changing for me. I felt like I was dragging, just getting through the day, suffering, right? But just going through the motions. And then, just to get to the place where I'm like, wow, is this what it feels like to feel good? And to, get rid of all of these crazy chronic day-to-day symptoms, I mean, was just mind blowing, and that's what I knew, I had to, I had to learn this. I had to figure this out. I had to incorporate this. And then I had to show other people. I had to share it. I just feel like people have to know that this exists, that you don't just have to pop a pill. And in fact, that doesn't really kind of heal things, right? I mean,
Right. It doesn't. It's still lingering behind the scenes. You just
yeah,
don't.
you're not feeling it.
Yeah.
Suppressing symptoms, which, is nice, right? It's nice to not feel those symptoms, but it's like putting a Band-Aid on a gunshot wound, right? It's like, well, it looks pretty, it looks better, but underneath it's still festering. And it's like, well, why?
It'll get worse.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, why was that a problem to begin with? Like, you didn't really fix or heal the problem, and that's what I love about this approach, is that, it really gets to the root of what's going on, and heals, truly heals and reverses some of these issues and conditions.
Yeah, because then you don't have to be on like certain supplements or medications forever. Then you go back to, living a pretty healthy life and then managing with your healthy habits that are like the non-negotiables for you. You know what I mean? So it's nice. But we want to talk about homeopathy, which is another way to kind of get to the root cause outside of functional medicine. So would you tell a little bit more about homeopathy and what the difference is between functional medicine and homeopathy? I don't know if it's homeopathy or homeopathy. I always pronounce it wrong.
People would pronounce it differently, but homeopathy, I think, is generally how it's pronounced. Yeah, I mean, it definitely fits within kind of the framework of the kind of holistic integrative approach. Functional medicine definitely looks at, identifying and addressing root cause. And then the healing part of it, takes into account a lot of different modalities and approaches. So like we've talked about this whole time, there's nutrition, there's mindset, there's lifestyle, there's targeting and healing, the gut, infections, allergens, hormones, sometimes there's targeted supplements. So it's definitely a process that's well worth it, but it sort of incorporates a lot of different things. So homeopathy is similar, but it's a little different in that it's its own system of medicines, or its own system of remedies. So, homeopathic remedies are made from herbs, botanicals, and other natural materials, but they're super diluted. They're highly diluted, which makes them really gentle and really safe. And actually, if you look at a homeopathic remedy, it's just like a little tiny sugar ball. That's what it is, because it takes little like sucrose pills, and then the remedy is actually put on top of those. So that's why when you melt those in your mouth, the remedy is kind of getting in through the mucosal lining. And homeopathy is great because it can be used to heal physical ailments, and actually can be used to heal mental and emotional conditions as well. So I have it at home. I should have brought it there, but there's a book about this thick of all of the different remedies, in that really, really thin paper. And it's almost like a dictionary, but it's just a list of remedies and talks about all the different things that it's useful for. So if you've got an ailment, there's a remedy for that. So, and the cool thing about homeopathy is that, because it's super diluted and really almost barely has any of the raw material left, it's, we call them nanoparticles. What it really does is it like introduces a hint of something to the body, and then it stimulates the body to heal itself. So the body is the thing that's doing the healing with a little bit of help or support from the remedy, if that makes sense.
Yep.
And so, a good example of kind of how it differs then from conventional medicine or approaches is that I like to talk about like a sprained ankle, for example. So, a lot of people sprain their ankle and it swells up and it hurts, right? Those are kind of the classic symptoms. And so a lot of times people will take things like acetaminophen or ibuprofen, and they do that because it numbs the pain receptors, right? So it decreases the pain receptors, and it might even artificially help the swelling to go down because of the introduction of the medication. So it hasn't really healed it, but it gives people some temporary relief, like a false sense of relief, right? And so, you still have to be careful because if you walk on it, like it's still injured.
Yeah.
So, I gave somebody or recommended a remedy for them, to take when they sprained their ankle, and the swelling started going down pretty quickly, and the pain started going down as well. And they told me like, well, I'm a little bit nervous about like walking on it or doing activity because I feel like I can, but I don't want to injure it because, I don't have the swelling or the pain to tell me to stop. And I was like, see, that's where it differs. If you're not feeling pain after taking homeopathy or you're not having swelling, it's because the body didn't need those things anymore. It actually healed so that the swelling could come down naturally. It wasn't forced, it wasn't numbed. It was actually healing, at a much more rapid pace. So that's kind of a good example of how that works.
Yeah, I love that. And actually, I just had my 2-year-old, he fractured his femur, which was devastating. And he was given a lot of medications for pain relief at the hospital, like pretty strong ones, like morphine-based ones, and then Advil, Tylenol. And when we went home, I didn't really want to keep him on those. So I got two. One of them was the arnica, and another one, I forget what it was, but it was really for like deep bone fractures. And we gave him those right before bed because he kept waking up in the middle of the night screaming in pain. And they told us that a lot of times with these types of fractures, they get muscle spasms. So he would wake up very distraught. And if I gave him the homeopathy or yeah,
Mm-hmm.
before bed, he would actually be able to sleep through the night and he felt a lot better. He still put it on his leg. He still was like, Mommy, don't touch it. He was very aware that it was still healing, but he was able to sleep through the night. So it showed me that it was working and it was working very well for us.
Mm-hmm. My daughter does the same thing when she gets a runny nose. She says, Mommy, I need Allium Cepa.
Oh my gosh, she's learning so young. I love it.
Because she knows. And it's funny because, if I could give like a little kind of, so Allium Cepa, for example, is made from the onion. So, the way that homeopathy works is that the thing that it treats gives symptoms that are similar to what the raw material would create.
Try and sniffle with onions.
Yeah. So when we, eat or smell or whatever an onion, a lot of times the nose starts running, our eyes kind of burn, and we might get watery. It's just this whole like drippy sort of thing. And so homeopathy, because it's super diluted and it's been prepared in like this special way, in its homeopathic form, Allium Cepa helps to relieve those symptoms. So when you get a runny nose or watery kind of runny, watery eyes and
Yeah.
burned eyes, Allium Cepa triggers, supports the body in healing those symptoms. So it's such a cool concept. It's really neat.
That is a very cool concept, and it's interesting because my grandma, I always call her like my wise woman because she's we're from Eastern Europe and she grew up in a village, so she knows a lot about plants and all sorts of remedies. Whenever my kids were young, she'd always tell me to like tie a onion like in a sock or something that
Yeah.
or garlic and put it on their crib so they can smell it while they're sleeping if they did have like a runny nose or something like that. She's full of all these different things, but it's funny because anything I learned from her and anything I learned in like just my own training or even speaking to you, I'm like, everything's aligned. It's
Yeah.
all based on this old wisdom that we've had around forever that we kind of lost, and now we have to relearn and bring it back to our lives.
Yes, it's so funny because my parents are from Eastern Europe as well. And my mom is similar. She's got these like old school remedies, right? These natural kind of approaches. And at the time I was like, mom.
Yeah, exactly.
Now I'm like, she was onto something.
I know, like, grandma, like, you know so much. I need to start learning from you. I thought I was going to teach you and our whole family what to do, but my grandma, she has it all figured out. She even has, like, I don't know where she got it. I don't know if she went to the pharmacy before she came to the United States and, like, just got a bunch of medication, but she has a whole suitcase of meds for anything. And then she has a bunch of plants, and she'll be like, you know what? She'll, like, you'll tell her something. She'll be like, oh, I have an aloe plant for you. Like, my husband, what he got a cut, like a really bad cut from broken glass, and he didn't want to go to the ER, which I told him to go to the ER. He should have went to the ER and got stitches, but he didn't. So then we come to visit them for the holidays, and it's like, it's looking bad. Like, it looks like it's rotten, like infected. I'm like, do you at least have Neosporin or something in this house? She's like, no, but I have an aloe plant. She cut it open and wrapped it around his leg. I will say he said it was very painful throughout the night, but he woke up in the morning, the skin was completely sealed and there was no infection. Like, it was just wild. And it's like, it's all these things that come from the earth that are actual natural remedies, and we have to start learning more about them. And obviously, homeopathy is based on a lot of the plants around us. So, and stuff too, right? It has some elements that
Yes, yes, it comes from a bunch of other stuff too. But again, it's almost always like if you think about like bee stings is another great thing. So there's, something called apis, which is another remedy. And if you think about it, and it's made, in part or somehow through a bumblebee, a bee. So, when you think of getting stung by a bee, you think of swelling up, right? You get like welts, swollen. It might be itchy or kind of burny. And so if somebody has like hives or an allergic reaction or an anaphylactic reaction where they get swelling, kind of stuff, apis is the remedy,
wow.
because in its homeopathic form, prepared in the way that it is, to be kind of known as a homeopathic remedy. It heals, it helps the body to heal from anything that's kind of puffy, swelly, fluid filled, that sort of thing. So it's just a cool, system of remedies, and it's really great for kids. It's almost always what I go to immediately for kids, because kids don't want to change their lifestyle. I mean, we want them to be as healthy as possible, but it's so hard for it's hard for adults to make some of the changes that they need to make in order to heal. It's even harder for kids. I mean, they just want to kind of be normal, right? So, if they can take these remedies that are so simple and easy to take, and they melt in their mouth and they taste good, and it helps them to heal, like truly heal, not just kind of symptom suppress. It's just easy. It's just, such an easy approach with them. It's really great. And again, it's gentle and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, because there's some herbals that I like for adults that you wouldn't want to give to kids. They're just too strong. And then the whole trauma behind it, trying to give a kid like a herbal that doesn't taste good compared to a little sugar pill, it's like night and day experience for them. So I
Yeah.
you. So how long does it take to use homeopathy for like acute issues versus like chronic issues?
That's a great question. It definitely varies. It depends on what the condition is. But for acute, so like colds, flus, an allergic reaction, it could be minutes that you start seeing improvements. It could be a few hours, or it can be a few days, so again, kind of depending on what it is, but you should start seeing an improvement pretty quickly from it. I had a friend whose daughter, I think she was 2 at the time, was having she was having difficulty breathing. She has asthma. And so she was doing this like belly breathing, and she was like, and brought her to the hospital, which was absolutely the right thing to do. They gave her some treatments. They sent her home. She was not getting better. So she called me, in a panic. What can I give to her? And so I made some recommendations, and within a couple of hours, she's like, oh my gosh, she's like breathing. She's like breathing normally. She's sleeping soundly. It did the trick in a way, right? It helped her body to do what it was supposed to do, which is to heal itself. So it can be pretty quick for those acutes. Now, chronics are a different, so things like autoimmune issues, mental health conditions. Now, listen, if somebody's having a panic attack, there's something that can also give them relief within minutes. So, that's kind of an acute within a chronic.
Yeah.
But still, like, they still have like a generalized anxiety, or like a, major depressive, issue. And that can take a few weeks or a few months, sometimes even a few days. So it can actually be pretty quick as well. But compare to sitting with it for a life, it's a pretty quick. And again, the idea of it is not that it just helps people to feel better, but it also is healing. So another great example of that is, and a chronic, sort of chronic and an acute, is like seasonal allergies, right? So there are, remedies or protocols homeopathically that a person can take for seasonal allergies. So they might take it, and like that season might be like, I'm starting to feel a little bit better, but and then ideally with homeopathy, the idea is the next year should be a little bit better, even without the remedy. So they might be like, oh, I still have symptoms, but they're not as bad. And so they might take the remedies again. And then the next year, their symptoms might even be better because they've healed, if that makes sense. It's actually reversing, it's actually healing. And until ideally they just don't need it at all. And then if it pops up again, they know exactly what to take to kind of help the body to kind of get back on track. So it's just amazing. It's just been, to me, everything else, functional medicine, took me to maybe about 90%. And then I actually had like a Lyme, or not Lyme, but a tick-borne illness that really wiped me out
Even
again.
a lot in the chronic illness world that tick-borne illnesses are a trigger.
Yeah, again, my understanding, I think people have different understandings of it. My understanding is that, you know, people could be carriers, right? Like there are people who might test positive for Lyme but they don't have any symptoms because their immune system handles it, right?
Yep.
It keeps it at bay, much like we do like with EBV, like bar, whatever, right? Like we keep things at bay. But then something happens and there's like a weakened immune system and now, here it comes. So that's what happened for me. It was like, hello, here I am. And homeopathy is really the thing that got me. I mean, it saved my life. It really did the trick for me.
Actually, to know you can use homeopathy for Lyme, that's news to me. That's good to
Yeah, yeah. And people have different sort of ways of approaching it. The way that I learned was that you manage the symptoms that are presenting. So you pick the remedies so say I have
that
like
makes
a chronic fatigue or joint pain or anxiety. I was having intrusive thoughts, out of scary intrusive thoughts. So I was managing that with homeopathy. And by healing those things, it healed what it needed to.
right.
So it's not like Lyme per se, unless it's like you catch it immediately, but
Right.
you heal the things as they're showing up and that heals the body. So yeah, I can't say enough about homeopathy. I love it and it helped me so
Wow.
much.
Huge, especially because I think the people who are the chronic Lymies, they really struggle to get over the hump. And knowing that you don't always have to be targeting the infection, sometimes it's about getting at the root of what the infection is causing and kind of stabilizing your immune system so it can handle everything is good information for them to know.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I just love the whole kind of integrative, holistic approach to, and I think it's also, I feel like I always need to say, because sometimes I get backlash, I'm not against medication by any means. I think there is absolutely a time and a place. I think that modern medicine can be an absolute blessing. I just think it's overused. I think that people aren't aware or given just the knowledge to understand that this alternative, this other method exists. I come people come to me who are on medication, and that's fine, you know. And so sometimes their goal is maybe to get off of medication, and we can work towards that. Sometimes they just want to decrease their reliance on medication. You know, they still want to kind of hang on to it, and that's fine too, right? We can heal the body around that, you know, and support the body. So maybe eventually they might not need it. Maybe they will. Maybe they'll still take something here or there, which is okay. But just to know that this exists is like everybody has to know.
All about giving people more options. We don't want to take options away. We want people to have the options they already know of, because they might need it. They might need it temporarily. They might want to use it long term, but knowing that there are other things you can also do, maybe even for the symptoms that the medication don't fully cover. Because, you know, even for me, I was and still am on thyroid meds. I'm reducing my dose, but there are a lot of symptoms that the thyroid meds were claiming that they were going to help me with, but they didn't. So then, like, helping my body heal in other ways was what really helped me. So
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm in agreement with you 100%. So I just think it's about looking at the body as a whole, you know, and understanding that, you know, if you want to heal your mind, you know, you have to heal your body too.
absolutely. So what are some key takeaways we think that we want people to go home um, with everything we talked about? Because we talked about a ton. We talked about, you know, um, options in improving your mental health. We talked about the stress buckets. We talked about body awareness. And we talked about nutrition as a healing tool and homeopathy. What do you think, like maybe 3 key points that people can take home just so they, you know, something to think about or keep in mind during their journeys?
I would say start with stress and mindset, right? That's where it begins. It lays the foundation for all of the rest of it. You know, if you, there are some changes that you can make, you know, with nutrition and lifestyle to kind of clean things up a little bit and, you know, give your immune system a little bit of a break and healing. I think that that can be a great way to start. And absolutely, if you need more help, because this can be overwhelming and it's so hard to know where to go, reach out for help. You know, there's, you know, the two of us, but there's so many, you know, of us out there. So it's not like, oh, call me, call
Exactly.
somebody.
People to have options, and it's not about selling your services. It's giving them a whole new world to explore, so they really have, you know, opportunity to help themselves. I love that. I love all of that. So with that, if you guys are interested in learning more about overcoming your mental health problems from a holistic perspective and or know about homeopathy, you know now who to reach out to. um, Follow her, and you do have a freebie that people listening in or anyone interested can get, right?
Yes, I do. So if you follow me, if you go to my page, which is, you know, Elena_Mundorf, that might be hard to spell. So ELANA_MUNDORFF. But if you go to my page and then you go to the link in my bio, I do have a free ebook that I hope everybody goes and gets for themselves. And it's called Holistic Healing, you know, reversing depression and anxiety through the functional medicine lens. And it's a tool that talks a little bit about what functional medicine is and gives you concrete strategies that you can start incorporating today, you know, to start working on healing your mood by healing your body. So, you know, that's my gift to you. I hope you all, you know, get that and enjoy it and reach out to me if you need more support and help.
And I'm sure they can DM you too if they can't find your link or something.
Absolutely. Please do. I love getting DMs, love chatting.
And same with me. I have a freebie on my website called What to Do Before Seeing a Practitioner. It's just a lot of tools you can start working on your own if a practitioner isn't accessible to you. And then 5 ways to simplify your life. It's some tips to, you know, reduce some stressors and make things a little bit easier. So you can DM me for that, or you can also go on my webpage. Hopefully this was helpful. We love chatting. I definitely love chatting with you. And if anyone wants to find out more, then always contact us. We're always happy to chat.
This has been so great and so much fun, and I hope informative. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.